Yeah.
This practice gives us a way to meet that, metabolize it, alchemize it, be transformed by it, and then watch what occurs as that unfolds is an elegant movement of life.
Yeah.
Which then has more love, more beauty, more goodness.
More
Now that's not,
potential. Yeah.
it's profound. It's really profound. And what I think is unique and beautiful about this is that not only is it that new paradigm and profoundly new and different and satisfying, there is a very simple bridge from that paradigm into this new paradigm. And I think that's been the thing that's missing, because there have been people talking about this new paradigm.
Right.
Eckhart Tolle talks about it. Byron Katie talks about it. Adyashanti talks about it. But those people, as much as they talk about it, I haven't seen them give a real nice bridge to couples, to people as they're in the nitty gritty of relationship, to make that transmutation of their entire existence. But this is a very simple, user-friendly way to do that. It's like, and once you get a feel for it, your whole being is like, it's like a dolphin back in water. It's like, oh, of course, it feels so much better than being in a desert. It's like, it's what I want, instead of like, ooh, that sounds good. Let's try it. Let's try to, I think what I've seen in a lot of the spiritual world, I was, in a lot of these circles for a long period of time. And the people I knew who had profound awakenings around Adyashanti or whoever, they would, when it came to the relational piece and the relationship lives, they're still usually repeating these patterns. There's still a lot of frustration, a lot of repetitive,
So welcome everyone, and great to see you, Tobin. I'm really excited to do this interview dialogue with you today, and I'm a fun opportunity for me to get to talk with you about your work, the relational aligning process, or wrapping, as you're calling it, that I know you've been doing for so long and working with couples. And so this is just really exciting chance for me to get to talk with you a little bit and talk about how you do your process is really my goal today, and kind of flesh it out a little bit for people, like what are the kind of some like the key elements and how you help individuals and couples, and I'm excited to get to learn about it too, and dialogue and share some of the things I've done with you, and
definitely
see what emerges out of this. So
beautiful. Feels like a great treat to do this with you. And we've been, we've dived into these arenas so beautifully together. And then out of some of the work that you and I did and all the work that I've done with couples over the years, this new process has emerged in the last couple of years. And a lot of people are having miracles in their relationships. It's truly profound and elegant work. And then people are hearing about it and they're saying, hey, do you have a book about it? Or do you have this? And the book's in the works, but it's not out there yet. So it'd be great to get you to help me articulate some of the principles of it and ask questions that I think everybody wants to know, and then have something for people to look at and see, oh, here's at least a little to go on before they sign up for the actual process of it. But it's the simplest way of describing it is it's a very user-friendly, simple, elegant way to get below the usual dance of the separate sense of self, ego structures that are so habitually operating in us and in our relationships. It's a way to melt below that really elegantly, as you know, with Aligning with Life, that practice that you were so deeply immersed in and are so, just gifted my life with. It's very similar to that, where there's this kind of drifting down into a state of presence in a kind of meditative, simple way that I have come up with, just like the easiest way in. And then from there, it's an unwinding and a clarifying and an emphasizing of that which is most optimal for any two people in a relational field, is what can then start to operate and come into fruition and live. The things that are challenging get dissolved. The things that are optimizing get enhanced. And then we start to live in that sweet spot of relating where magic occurs. And this is true for friendships. I've seen it, I've done it with guy friends, and it produces some amazing beauty miracles. And then where it gets really juicy is in, deeper, longer term relationships, or very, very fresh, right out of the gate relationships. It just optimizes things. It's truly magical.
Yeah, I've experienced it with you. I mean, I've experienced it with you one-on-one clients. So how do you kind of begin that process when you're with the client?
Right. And the simple description of it is I help people, each person. So say a couple comes to me, and what I will do is just start to guide them deeper into themselves, into their own presence through awareness. Just have them close their eyes and start breathing and feeling and relaxing and being. And I have a way of it's kind of like introducing or guiding somebody into that state of being. Now, that state of being is often hard to access and live from when you're in a relational dance.
Right.
So quick to jump into this other preconditioned way of being. And when two people are attracted to each other, a huge part of that attraction, in my experience, every single time, is the fact that there is a perfect mirror for those triggers to get set off in each other.
Yes.
So we're in a really, hot space when two people who've already been attracted to each other come to a session like this. It's like, and my job is to get things down below that usual momentum. It's like a vicious circle starts to go online. It's just and this can even be true in the honeymoon. For some people, the honeymoon, as good as it is, can be feeding these things that later can backfire. And I've seen this many times for people, even in like the best relationship. Oh my God, I found the one. We're soulmates. We're twin flames. We're this, we're that. And if they're not knowing how to ground and come into what I call your own sovereign space of being, sovereign bubble of experience. Now, I'm not saying to be cut off or defended. That's a whole other thing. But most people, when the relationship comes online, it's so quick. Even avoidant people are relationally hooking in a way that energetically keeps things just activated and stuck.
Right.
So we need to get that softened enough that each person is there, available, soft, present, transparent, willing to be vulnerable, willing to feel. So the relational dance is still occurring, but based, focused, primarily in a sense of deep embodied presence within their own their own beingness.
Right.
Now, once you get there, magic can happen. You have two people who've already been attracted, who are already kind of having some energetic dance occurring, and you start to then speak to what's going on in that field, and you get a kind of what I call a 3-for-1 deal. You get this person's optimal healing and growth and evolution. You get this person's optimal healing and growth and evolution.
Right.
You get this relational, this third thing, which is a relationship, to optimize itself and become open to the magic and the beauty and whatever that particular dance that these two human beings are here to do in this life can then optimize and unfold in the most
beautiful. And thank you. And I've heard you use this term a bunch. Your own sovereign state. So it feels like there's this really big component. I mean, this is a big one. Is really, again, keeping people in their own wholeness and their own sense of like who they are. And and before you go into work with them, right, you bring them back into that place. Or if you
that's the foundation.
It's like, okay, let's come back.
That's right. That's right. So that is the foundation of it all.
Yeah.
And some people have the ability to go there and hang there and live from there really naturally, and it's easy for them. Some people it's a little more difficult. So as the facilitator of this, I have the ability to, this person's a little off, or this person's a little too far gone. We need to be a little here and available to this interaction.
Right.
Because it's not just like meditating. We start to communicate. We start to, like in aligning with life. once you're in that sovereign felt, I call it the hum of your own being. You're just humming along, no matter what it is. And then you're naming out loud, I'm feeling, or I'm aware of, fill in the blank. And even if that's in relation to the other person, you're owning it as your own wholeness having an experience.
Yeah.
Instead of he or she is making me feel such and such by what they just said.
Yeah.
I'm aware of this arising in me, and I'm speaking it into the field. And even if I'm going to speak to that person about something that's triggering me or activating me or really frustrating the hell out of me, I'm still going to say, I'm aware of this feeling in me. I'm tracking this experience that arises. Or this is what I would like to say to you, fill in the blank. As opposed to just the usual thing that people do is once you get into this, like, it's a very linear and very, it's based in division. Once most communication that happens, even nonviolent communication, for most people, if they're not really getting the subtlety of that art, it's based in division.
Yeah.
And it feeds the very thing we're trying to get free from, which is frustration and a sense of isolation and stuckness. So even if you work things out on that level, it can be stilted versus what we have the access to do in this relational aligning practice. It's literally, it's an unwinding on the level of the oneness that we are.
Yeah.
And it's very paradoxical because we as consciousness are oneness, and then there's this relationship that is very much looks like two entities.
That's right.
In some ways it is. It's me and you.
That's the great paradox, right?
Paradox.
We are all one, and it's
divine paradox.
Divine, division happening at the same time, and that's all about non-duality. What seems like separate things are really
exactly. And this is where the rubber hits the road, because it's one thing to realize non-duality in a meditation retreat with Adyashanti on a cushion and with your eyes closed, but then to live that, to relate as that, to show up and to have that live over time in a relational field, that's where the real magic is. Now, it's also where the real insane challenges arise. This is the trickiest territory on planet Earth. That's why I love this so much. It's so fertile. It's so challenging. But once you learn to align and unwind and optimize in the way that this practice allows you to do, the magic, that's the thing everybody knows is possible. Everybody's like, why am I so frustrated in relationship? It's because we kind of know there's this potential,
That's right. The potential for love there is so strong. I mean, that really, in that love that just, when we're talking about the oneness again, or spirit, or God, or whatever, that's just wants to come and be shared through us, right? And then that intimacy, relationship that is just so profound in that kind of meeting, and then all that gets to come up with it, right?
And it's the ultimate challenge. All of our most subtle, most profoundly challenging stuff bubbles right into this field. This practice gives us a way to meet that, metabolize it, alchemize it, be transformed by it, and then watch what occurs as that unfolds is an elegant movement of life. Which then has more love, more beauty, more goodness. Now, that's not it doesn't mean that every couple is guaranteed to stay together forever. I'm not saying that, but at least we get the other things out of the way that are just this frustrating, repetitive pattern stuff. And the elegance of what's true can unfold. And oftentimes that is just an ever deepening loop of love, a deepening kind of intimacy, a more powerful kind of passion even arises out of it. It's beautiful.
And all that potential, right? And I get there's something you're saying too that's like, it's this balance between desire and non-attachment. I think. Too, right? Like there's this desire in relationship and the love and that goodness that we all, it's so good, and it's like this force, right? That's just trying to pull us towards it. It's so good. And to have that kind of like letting go, I've heard you say, without having an agenda, to see what's really true and wants to emerge between us, right? And I feel like you do, like I get that when you know.
That's a really key piece to highlight. That's a big piece of this, and that's, in some ways, there's a certain kind of ego death that we have to allow for to align with life, to align with the true way that relationship wants to unfold. But
and those are the aha moments that you give people, right? Or that come out of
that's my job.
when they realize
exactly, and my job is to
way here, or this was happening, and
yes, and when I facilitate, I have the ability to help people just very naturally drop into that place. And the miracle of ego death, it's such a highfalutin word, but the reality of it is just, oh, this feels better.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like, that was painful. Now it's not painful. Oh, wow, it might be scary. That's the price we pay to get into a non-agenda way of being.
Yeah.
A little vulnerability and a little fear.
Yeah.
Once you're willing to feel that, and let life start doing what it most wants to do, you get, whoa, this is way better, way easier, way more natural, way less drama, way less frustration, and it ends up being good every time. That's a lot of the shifts come just from that simple, true, authentic communication.
That's huge. Yeah, I guess so. That's the space that you provide, and part of it. I mean, there's a lot of things,
it's a part of it. It's a big
can
part of it.
say things and be vulnerable in a way that they haven't been able to be with their partner, but they can. And you become that neutral third party who can actually help them understand each other better.
Exactly. And like I said, like communication, it's a true art. True communication is a true art. And to me, of all the things I've ever been exposed to in terms of communication skills and tools, this is by far the best. I've never seen anything else. Maybe there are things out there and I'd love to hear about them if you know of them. Anyone who's listening to this, please tell me of these skillful places. And I know a lot of people do like nonviolent communication, but I've seen that used in a way that most of what I've seen, maybe the essence of it is a pure way to communicate, but what I've seen people do with it is just another form of agenda. It's another form of you need to hear me or else.
Right.
As opposed to what this type of communication provides, which is a place to articulate, share, express, free from the contracted. See, usually when two people are interacting, even if they go into like an NBC session, there's just like a me and you, we're going to talk. This different way, it's kind of like I'm launching my truth into the space.
Yeah.
It just happens that this person hears it.
Right.
And when communication happens that way, it's very easy for the person to hear.
Right.
And respond. Then that person gets a turn and they do the same thing. And it's very separate. So they're no longer like you, but you. And that's like, an example of this is me and my mom. People are stuck in a dynamic for decades. And I finally said to her, hey mom, would you be willing to try this practice? This relational aligning thing.
Okay.
And she was really reluctant, like, oh, that sounds pretty woo-woo, and I don't know. And I was like, I promise it's super user-friendly. I guarantee you'll love it. And if you're not, we'll just stop. Any moment you say we don't want to do it anymore, we just stop.
Yeah.
So an hour later, we were both in tears and we were both like heart open and holding hands and seeing things and feeling things we had for decades. Now, the trick is the old stuck stuff can be so powerful. The old belief systems, the old attachments can be so strong that without a facilitator who kind of gets that terrain, and can kind of guide you into and unwind certain pieces that otherwise would just keep asserting themselves in the field, then it can stay stuck. So that's where the art of this whole thing comes in. That's where the facilitator, myself, is bringing, it's like somebody called it couples whispering. It's like there's this intense creature there that just wants to growl and buck and kick and stay stuck in its old patterns, and the facilitator, in a very loving, very gentle, very precise and attuned way, starts to allow for an unwinding of that and a relaxation into that being's natural state.
Yeah.
That's why I love the horse whisperer analogy, because like the horse actually likes it once they've gotten out of that. Like,
well, I can just feel it as you're even saying it, and in the process, and I'm imagining you with clients and how you work with them is, I mean, because I know how good it feels to just be in that space.
yeah, it's like it's
And
the
then,
thing we're all longing for. It's the great and powerful It's the thing
yeah,
like we're out of that cycle, that frustration.
right. And I can feel like even, and this is something you do too, I imagine, with couples, right? Even if you haven't gotten all the way to the resolution that you're wanting as the couple, just the process alone, you're continuously bringing people back to this spaciousness and this okay with whatever's happening in the moment.
Yeah, and it just does feel good. It feels better, and you actually get this inherent sense that just flows through your entire being that, oh, we're on track. I call it the sweet spot. We're in the sweet spot. And even if we're not there, we feel the inherent, it's kind of like a true kind of hope.
Yeah.
Like, oh, there's a movement here. There's an intelligence at work here. If we just stay the course, it's going to take us where we really want to go.
Yeah.
Which is towards something that we intuit is possible here.
Yeah.
And it's a goodness.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah, there's a goodness in it, and there's a way you describe that as an intelligence. Like an intelligence that's just trying to move through us all the time. It's like what it calls for in individuals to do this too is a lot of vulnerability and a lot of courage.
Yeah,
right?
No doubt.
You've got to say something like, hey, sweetie, this is coming up for me, and it might be kind of scary. I mean, I know those places in myself in relationship. It's like, whoa. This is scary for me, and I might want. I got me in that fear because I might be afraid that if I say this, you're gonna be upset.
Yeah, exactly, right? Exactly, and that's after enough life, enough awareness, and watching enough romantic comedies, you realize that 99.9% of all the trouble we ever get into in relationships and even in life is because we're not courageous and we're not willing to be vulnerable and share things that are otherwise kind of scary and potentially dangerous to the status quo of that relationship. That's what backfires later.
Right.
So you, after enough of that, then that helps you have that courage that you're talking about and that willingness to be vulnerable. And you just, even though it's scary, you bring it in. And then the amazing thing is once you've done that 10, 20, 30, now for me, hundreds of times, you realize that it's always better. It's always worth it. If you're with somebody who's at all a match for you and all worth hanging out with, then it's way better to do it this way.
That's it, isn't it? So imagine that's when you coach people. I think about that, like when it's like, when we're scared and we don't want to move forward. And it seems like I've seen this happen a lot in relationships, and I imagine this happens a lot in relationships that are on the rocks or in trouble. Is one party just doesn't want to, they just don't want to go there.
Yeah.
And then, but how do you help them with that? Is it that you basically what you just said, that it's going to be better? Like,
that's part of it. But another part of it is that the beauty of this practice is that once you do it, even for 5 minutes, something in your system softens and the willingness is just more there. It just creates that safe space you've always been longing for. You can kind of feel the other person in a different, they're in a different space. And if I'm there holding space, that obviously provides another level of support, of safety, of presence that allows people to like, oh, wow. And then people within 5 minutes are saying things that for years they haven't wanted to say. It's really amazing. There's just a softening and a trust that comes from this type of presence. People ultimately are wanting to tell the truth.
Yeah.
And they're in pain because they're not telling the truth. Now, they're very, very afraid of some negative potential outcome. That's why they don't do it. But with enough support, enough presence, it usually allows for things to be spoken that maybe for years or weeks or months or however long have just not been spoken.
Yeah.
And then it allows that to be brought into the space in a way that creates new results instead of old frustrated ones.
Yeah.
Old patterns.
Yeah.
But it does take that's the certain level of maturity, a certain level of readiness. Depends. People come to that at different moments for different reasons. Some people, like I have some clients in their early 20s, they're just on fire for this approach to life. They just have that.
Yeah.
I have some people later in life, the only reason they come to me is because they have kids and they're about to get divorced and they don't want to. So they're willing to look at things in a new way. I have other people who their partner brings them there and they're reluctant, but because they feel something in the space with me and they start to trust, they all of a sudden just get right on board with the practice. And that's where those miracles happen. But no matter how you get there, it's true. Each person has to get there in some way. At some point, I'm willing to be courageous, be vulnerable, be honest, be willing to feel things I've never wanted to feel, be willing to hear things that I might not have been able to hear before. And that's partially just doing this practice. If you learn, like I want to just be able to teach this to people, do it on your own, do it on your own, do it on your own. That in and of itself will, for most people, get you where we're talking about. Yeah. Now, then there's the more sticky stuff, there's the more challenging stuff, and then having a session or having a facilitator who knows how to really work through those very scary and sticky pieces, that can be invaluable and sometimes necessary, because a lot of this is based in very deep pattern, trauma, like conditioning from childhood and who knows where else, past lives. But when it's done in the way that I facilitate it, it accesses all those levels and unwinds and heals all those levels. It can be, in some ways, like I said, some of the best therapy happens for each of the individuals while we're doing this relational dance. Yeah,
that's so good. Could you say a little bit more about the trauma piece? Because it seems like that is such a big thing that it really, and this piece of like our young stuff.
Yeah, so that's the other. So when you asked earlier, like, what is a typical thing? The most typical thing is people have been in relationship anywhere from 3 weeks to 3 decades, somewhere in that time range, and somewhere in there, the shit came up. My childhood wounding met your childhood wounding, and we're in a dance, and it is very frustrating and very painful, and we keep bumping into it for some reason. It just keeps showing up. And or somebody's seen that shows up in very short-term relationships and it blows them out and they keep breaking up because of the same pattern, and they're like, whoa, let's look at this. Let's look at this deeper phenomenon, this deeper force, which is this very powerful, phenomenal thing that happens on planet Earth. We have this childhood wounding, then we becomes a magnet, and we bring somebody in who at first we're like, oh, I love you, you don't seem like you'd match that pattern at all, and then all of a sudden there's like, and they're doing the same thing in your direction, and boom, we're back in a dance that is based on one of the most poignantly challenging and painful emotional imprints in our psyche. Some deep relational thing of,
When someone gets really triggered like that, if something really, because it seems what happens a lot, right? Someone gets really triggered, it's really upsetting, and you can feel it. It's not just the present circumstances that are creating this. It's like something much more. What do you do then with those folks when you're working and working and helping them?
Well, I do the exact same thing that we're talking about. I have the ability to. So usually it's very fresh. Like, we keep getting stuck in this certain way. That person keeps triggering me in this exact same way. And so I guide them into the deeper presence, and then we will actually invite that memory. But the memory, even in the mind, will get you in touch with the felt sense of it. And then we have something to work with. So through presencing, through feeling, through articulation. In my opinion, this is the ultimate trick on planet Earth. It's what we're most hungry for, is how do we get out of these repetitive patterns?
Right, and into positive reinforcement loop, transformative patterns.
Yeah, exactly, like an up-leveling loop of more healing, more openness, more wholeness.
Beautiful.
More ability to act according to that wholeness, which then allows life to move in the way that is more optimal and more beautiful
Mm.
and less repetitive and frustrating.
Yeah,
Sure,
that's
it's a
so
new
right.
paradigm of living. It's a new
Yeah.
it's a new way of looking at it and showing up. Luckily,
New paradigm of relationship, and that's a
very,
potential. Yeah.
it's profound. It's really profound. And what I think is unique and beautiful about this is that not only is it that new paradigm and profoundly new and different and satisfying,
Yeah.
there is a very simple bridge from that paradigm into this new paradigm. And I think that's been the thing that's missing, because there have been people talking about this new
Right.
paradigm.
Right.
Eckhart Tolle talks about it. Byron Katie talks about it. Adi Shanti talks about it. But those people, as much as they talk about it, I haven't seen them give a real nice bridge to couples, to people
Yeah.
as they're in the nitty gritty of relationship, to make that transmutation of their entire existence. Like, but this is a very simple, user-friendly way to do that. It's like, and once you get a feel for it, your whole being is like, it's like a dolphin back in water. It's like, oh, of course, it feels so much better than being in a desert. You know, it's like, it's what I want, instead of like, ooh, that sounds good. Let's try it. Let's try to, I think what I've seen in a lot of the spiritual world, I was, in a lot of these circles for a long period of time. And the people I knew who had profound awakenings around Adi Shanti or whoever, they would, when it came to the relational piece and the relationship lives, they're still usually repeating these patterns. There's still a lot of frustration, a lot of repetitive, like, no. And then they'd go to Adi and say, hey, well, what do you do? And he'd just say, well, you just do it, because he never really had to struggle with this stuff. He didn't figure this out. It's not, he's self-proclaimed, so this is not my area of expertise. So good luck, basically. Yeah. So what I think is so beautiful is that this is that paradigm of awakened living. Beautiful. And yet there's an easy, user-friendly, elegant approach to just almost like melting into this new paradigm. It's like a melting occurs. And that melting just feels so good. You want to do it over and over. Yeah. Yeah.